This is exciting to see this many people here. Why? Because we're talking about teaching. We're going to be talking a lot about technologies a lot of this session, but this is really focusing on how we can improve our game in the class, and I applaud all of you for your interest in being here today. Boy, it's absolutely fantastic and great to see everybody. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Jeff Butterfield, and I'm from a little school out in the South called Western Kentucky University. Just to kind of put that in perspective, we're a northerly suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, just about an hour north. So big drive for me to get out here, but absolutely tickled pink to be with you guys in San Diego today. Tell you what, let's start off just talking a little bit about higher education in general. And by the way, if I've got some high school folks here, the high school folks are all about flipped teaching. What we'll talk about will be relevant to them as well. But how's business been for you guys the last year or so? One of the things I teach my students is no one ever likes to ask, or answer a question. I'm seeing kind of some of this, some kind of like this, right? There's been some changes going on, haven't there? What we've seen over the last few years, from 2008 through 2012, some schools had a record period of time, particularly the community and technical colleges, right? Nationwide, you guys averaged 24% annual growth. Amazing. Those of us at the four-year schools, we didn't do quite so well. We've been really bad at pricing ourselves out of the market. But what's starting to happen? We're starting to see some of our fundamental indicators dropping. Nationwide, folks, here are the trends. Diminishing applications, diminishing admissions, drops in enrollment. For traditional age students, in large part, this has to do with shifts in demographics. The Census Bureau tells us that for the next 7 to 10 years, we can expect that pool of 18-year-olds is going to decline, right? And so a lot of the real good times that we've been enjoying for the last 4 or 5 years, we need to rethink our value proposition and kind of get back in the game. And how we're doing what we're doing, we need to do better. A couple of other questions. How's the money tree working out for those of you, particularly that are at publicly supported institutions? How's the old state legislator, local taxing authority? Oh my goodness. Oh, it's terrible, isn't it? 5 years, no raise. We've been 7 at our school, and it's crazy. I'm just still grateful to have a job, right? And so for some of you, all the growth that you've experienced has been kind of a mixed blessing. You've grown and grown and grown, but in the face of declining appropriations, right? That's kind of crazy. You know what really scares me is that a lot of state legislatures have learned over the past few years we can cut money from higher ed, and it's not the end of the world like they've been telling us, right? And I'm afraid we probably are going to see more of that in the future rather than less. How about financial aid? Have you guys read about the new financial aid rules that are coming into place? I see some big nods of the head. Has it reached out and bit you know where yet at your campus? If it hasn't, it's going to. It's going to affect the community colleges, the 2-year schools first. It's going to percolate up to the 4-year schools. If you're not familiar with these changes, you need to be, because they're starting to put some very significant restrictions on how long students can be in school, how many hours they can take. And for a lot of us, that all of a sudden takes a student out of the game before they finish. And that's really scary. Yeah, absolutely. What about this little problem? Did you guys read the news last year about student debt? Interesting thing happened last year. Student debt in the United States now surpasses non-mortgage consumer debt in total. And it's growing fast, right? The default rate is about 33% nationwide. Students can't discharge it through bankruptcy. And so for a lot of students now, this is something that they're really worried about, and their parents are very, very concerned about as well. And they're being more critical consumers of the educational product that we're offering them. Oh, the contrast is a little low. Is there a way we can bring down the lights just a little bit on the screen so that we can see? Because a lot of my screens are going to be black. What that says in red is MOOC. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. How do you pronounce that word, folks? MOOC. Have you guys all heard about it? What does MOOC stand for? Massive? Open course. Who's afraid of the big bad MOOCs? Is there anybody that's worried about these? Well, I don't know, okay? If you go out and read the press and so forth like that, you'd think it was the end of the world coming. Massively open online classes. The idea is that technology, which is a great disintermediary or disintermediator, could potentially disintermediate us. So instead of us with our classes of 20, 30, whatever we've got, we can have one professor teaching a class of how many? Hundreds of thousands. I mean, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff. And this is one of these to watch, I think, okay? I don't know that MOOCs in their current incarnation are going to quite make it, but I do believe they're going to be a disruptive technology. And in some form or fashion, this technology is going to make those of us not involved in MOOCs have to increase our value proposition. This is a theme I'm going to keep rehearsing and reciting over and over today. All right? What really scares me, though, this is just Jeff Butterfield editorializing, I wouldn't be so worried if all this stuff about the dead and the MOOCs and so forth were just published in the Chronicle of Higher Education. You know? That's the magazine, that's our trade magazine. You see all sort of weird stuff in that. But guess what? All these issues that are facing higher ed now have become news stories on the 5 o'clock news. Articles like this, the end of the university as we know it. By the way, this is an article by Nathan Harden. If you haven't read it, I would recommend you go out and Google it and read it. It's extremely well written. It will scare you to death. It's just something you need to be aware of. But the end of the university as we know it. Do online courses spell the end of the traditional college and university? An article about MOOCs. Some of them aren't asking the question. New York Times. People are saying, yep, it's about time. Let's do away with higher education as we know it. End the university. When that hits the op-ed piece, right, of the New York Times, you know people are reading it. And it's not just the United States. We're seeing similar types of things being discussed in Europe and elsewhere. End of the empire for Western universities. But guess what? I knew we were really in trouble, and this is the one that scares me, when I saw all this discussion going on in something as mainstream as Newsweek magazine. This is an actual cover. It says, "The Key to Saving American Education." And you might think, well, they're talking about public schools, right? Well, they're talking about public schools and higher education. And if you can't see what it says, it's like a blackboard and somebody's writing words over and over again. It says we need to fire all the bad teachers, fire all the bad professors. Bad in air quotation marks. And by the way, these are the kind of things now that, again, state legislators, deans, college presidents and so forth are starting to read. So folks, what's really important is if we're going to be successful moving forward, we can't afford to be in this category. We've got to become more competitive. And in the face of things like a rise in proprietary schools, MOOCs, other technologies, what can we do? Well, a lot of folks say, Jeff, we're pretty progressive at my institution. We're teaching online courses, right? I've been teaching online for 10 years. I love it. And a lot of you know you've had pretty good success with online in the past years. Is it just me, or do you guys have classes where the online section fills before any of the face-to-face stuff even gets any play? Yeah! So there's something to be said for that. And a lot of us are having very good luck with online education. But guess what, folks? We're starting to see some cracks in the online education dam. Okay, let me tell you kind of a little bit about them. There's been a lot of research done in education, and over the past 5 years or so, there's been quite a bit of research looking at online education. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of that research, and you guys, you know, who teach online, you've all read it. It's what I call the "we're just as good as them" studies, right? You know what I mean? Little studies written by some professor who probably likes teaching online, and the conclusion is that online is just as good as that face-to-face class. And I love those articles. I have a whole collection of them. If my dean needs to see them, boy, I can march those right out. But in the grand scheme of things, and no disrespect if you're one that wrote it, it's not very good science, right? It's not very good science. But now fast forward a few years, and we've got years of experience now with online education, And as a result, we're starting to see better research. This will be about the only text you'll see in my presentation today, but I wanted to make sure I included it. At Columbia University, you guys have all heard of Columbia, right? It's not Nowhere State University. Big school. They have something called the Community College Research Center. I know a lot of you are familiar with it. If you're not, it's a huge clearinghouse of fantastic educational research. And they've been doing studies. It's a 5-year longitudinal study, over 50,000 data points, right? Now we're talking some serious science. And here's what they found. Students, and we're talking community college students, but 4-year it's the same, who are in online courses are significantly more likely to fail or withdraw than their counterparts in traditional courses. Emphasis on the word withdraw. And some of you have probably seen that in your online courses. They're less likely to complete their degrees, and they're less likely to transfer to 4-year institutions, particularly in areas for which a 4-year degree really is necessary. I don't know about you guys, we're seeing this in our online programs. We do a lot of online where we're at as well. This year, my faculty, one of the big problems we're trying to deal with is a huge population of students we call no-shows. They sign up for the online class, and you guys are nodding your head, and then they're a no-show. No homework, no quizzes, no tests, no nothing. And the number's gotten so big, we're actually trying to figure out what the cause of it is. It's becoming epidemic. It's what it is. I think it's what it is. They need a certain number of hours so that they can go into that debt that we were just talking about a little bit ago. That scares me to death. And I don't think that we can sustain that, to be honest with you. But I do think that's one of the big catalysts for it. All right? Interesting study. And there's more that are suggesting the same thing. But an interesting side element of this particular research is this. They found, and this wasn't their focus, but they found that students in hybrid classes that blend both the best of online, whatever that might be, along with elements of face-to-face instruction, they're the ones that are doing well. And I see some folks nodding their head. You've heard this before, haven't you? In fact, it echoes something the Department of Education a few years ago published a huge meta-study in which they concluded the same thing. This is where students actually perform better, all right? When we've got some sort of a blend between online and face-to-face elements. Now let me just pause here. A lot of people, when I cite research in my presentations, will ask me, where can I find that? As I often do in my sessions, at the end, I've got a bunch of little goodies I'm going to provide for you, and some of those include links to all of this stuff. So if you're wondering, how can I get that, I'm going to have all that available for you, okay? All right, guess what? There's a group called the Instructional Technology Council. Some of them you are familiar with. Again, they do a lot of wonderful research. And in 2009, late 2009, they released a study. They went out and they interviewed traditional age college students and non-traditional age college students. And guess what they found? They found that the preferred modality, if students really had a choice, their preferred modality was this hybrid or blended approach. Now, they'll sign up for an online class. Some of them just flat out have to. All right? They work, whatever the case might be. But given their druthers, this was their strong preference. Now, let's pause for just a second. Can the MOOCs ever do this? No. We who teach and have some sort of physical presence have a unique opportunity to really up the value proposition. And so that's what I'd like to spend a few minutes talking with you about today. And in particular, looking at something we call the flipped class, inverted instruction, teaching upside down, all sorts of different names for it. And they're really all the different names that refer to the same thing. There's a lot of interest in this right now. In fact, several magazines said the flipped classroom is an educational technology to watch for the next year. We expect a real rise in it. And there's a lot of room to grow as well. The ITC also concluded that only about 15% of community colleges offer systematically hybrid classes. Very few four-year universities do. By the way, some people get hung up on the definition. Let me just go down a rat hole and I'll come back out. Some schools say, oh, a hybrid class is a class that normally meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but if it's hybrid, we'll just meet on Tuesday. That's really not what we're talking about, okay? Don't get too hung up on that definition, all right? We're going to talk about that. What I'd like to do in our time together is use just a very simple, casual, question and answer kind of style. And if you've got any questions or comments, I know some of you have experience teaching in the flip method, pop in at any time. The lights are high enough I can certainly see you, okay? Don't worry about that. But let's dive into it. Question number one. We're just going to start off. What is flipped teaching? And a lot of people who maybe this is a new concept, this is what's going on in your mind. Well, I don't know about you. Lunch is hitting me like a ton of bricks right now. And I'm thinking if we get this thing over with, we could all go take a power nap, right? And I'm ready for one. And I'll tell you, here's what we'll do. How about I share with you what I call the Reader's Digest condensed version of what flipped teaching is. Y'all want to hear that? Okay, here it is. Ready? Whatever you used to do in class, assign it as homework, right? Whatever you used to do for homework, do it in class. Any questions? All right, oh. You guys, that really wasn't very satisfying. But if you go out to a lot of websites out there, that's about the definition that they're going to provide. That's the classic definition of a flipped class or inverted instruction. Man, there's got to be more to it than that. I remember I've been teaching flip now for 2 years. All my graduate classes I do is a flipped class. And I remember when I first heard about it, I said, this just sounds like a rehash of the same old, same old. And I tried to ignore it. But it just kind of keeps lingering on and more people talking about it and so forth. And so I did like a lot of people do. I looked at it through the filter of my own lens, of my own experience. And I thought back, wow, when I was in college, think back when you guys were in college. You guys are not older than I am. You can still remember that. Think about a few of you, all right? All right. What did we do for homework in most of our classes back then? We read the book. Students don't do that anymore, but we used to read the book. And so I thought to myself, I heard this definition and I said, okay, so they come to class and I tell them to sit quietly at their desks and read the book. This is going to be a real winner, isn't it? Yeah. Sign me up for that. I can see a few of you lazy people, yes, all right, that's what we're going to do. But guess what? There's really more to it than that. So let's see if we can dive in a little bit. What we're really talking about when we talk about flipped classes is really trying to change the paradigm of learning. This is a painting, folks, of a medieval university. It was painted in the year 1350, right? 1350. And I would contend that this doesn't look much different from college classrooms today, right? I got this guy falling asleep. I got people up there talking because they're bored. Everybody's sitting in what we call an auditorium-style class, facing the professor who's up there doing what? He's reading to them. What's the word? Lecturing, which comes from the old Latin word, which means to read. In fact, the lecture was invented in the 12th century. In the 13th century, just to get history with you, they invented what was the educational technology of the day, something called a lectern. Something that you could actually set your books and stuff on to where you could read to your students. Seriously, 1300s, okay? Here it is, 1350. Fast forward to 2013. Ooh, there was an uncomfortable little ah-ha-ha. I would suggest things aren't much different. The students are all still sitting in the same pattern. Half of them are not paying attention. There's a lectern up at the front of the room, and what's the teacher doing? Reading to them, right? But what we've got different, and I would say the only improvement that we've made, is we've got a projector with PowerPoint, and now we read the bullet points to them, a pedagogical technique we call death by PowerPoint. And I know nobody in here does that, but our colleagues who aren't here, we know what they do, right? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go back, ready, back, 1300, 2013. Wow. It's really scary, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And what we're really kind of thinking about with flipped teaching is this focus on the lecture. For various reasons, in the year 1350, it made absolute sense. In the year 2013, it doesn't so much. Now, that's not to say that lecture, or what we sometimes call direct instruction, doesn't have a place, but is it the highest, best use of what's relatively scarce class time with our students? And a lot of us would probably say probably not. And so when you think about flipped teaching, one of the things that people tend to focus on or think about is the idea of migrating direct instruction online, where it's very efficient. Students can watch it multiple times. My students, by the way, I did a study, average accessing my stuff online 2.7 times. Right? More than they do just in class where they've got one shot. And then we free class time up for more higher order thinking, activities, engagement, and so forth. And we'll talk about that as we go. But that's kind of the premise. And so if I was to give you a definition of what the flipped classroom is, I like to think of it as the best of both worlds. There are things that are better migrated online. All right? Direct instruction, taking simple quizzes, distributing the syllabus, this kind of stuff. Put it online. That's the best place for it. But then things that we can do in class with our students, student projects, student discussions, things like that, we use that time, hopefully, more effectively. Okay? And that's what we're going to focus on. Now, you talked about watching stuff online outside of class. And one of the questions that people ask me is, oh, wow, Jeff, sort of implicit in that is I'm going to have to create like some learning videos. I've heard about that. My friends who do flipped teaching tell me that they do this. That's going to take time and effort. And, I wouldn't have gone into this profession if I really had to work, right? I mean, I don't want to do that. I've got an idea. I'll just have my students go online and they can watch videos on, I'm going to put in air quotes, Khan Academy for my lecture. Okay? Khan Academy. By the way, what kind of videos is Khan Academy famous for? Math, mostly. They're doing some science and some other stuff. And it's really kind of neat. So substitute, in place of Khan Academy, Professor Messer, right? You've seen him. He's got over 1,000 videos on YouTube, or lynda.com, or the Cisco CCNA materials, or the Microsoft Office tutorials, and so forth. We'll just push our students out, and then we're off to the golf course. How good does that sound of an idea? Sounds great if you don't want to do a lot of work, right? But let me ask you a question. Who is this sorry sucker that we used to have to deal with periodically when we were in high school and middle school? It's what? That's the substitute. I was thinking about this. Was it just me, or did you guys? We used to treat our substitute teachers horribly. We were awful. We didn't listen to them. We didn't respect them. Okay, I have a few nods of the head. Were you guys like, oh, we loved them. We were very nice to them. And I don't believe it for a second. We were terrible to ours. All right? What now? Spankings. Wow. You lived in a braver part of the country than I did. Anyway, let me ask you, would you want to just bring in substitute teachers into your college class to teach your lectures for you? I know a few people are like, yeah, if I could get away with it. But fundamentally, what kind of an experience would your students have? Not a very good one. But think about it. If you sit down and say, well, I'm going to flip my class, and this semester I'm teaching networking, and, old Professor Messer out there on YouTube, he's got over 1,000 videos, mostly on CompTIA subjects, so he's got a Net Plus. I'll just have him watch Professor Messer. What have you just done? You just hired Messer as your substitute teacher. And there's a lot of research that shows professors that do this typically invoke one of several responses from their students. Number one, students assume you don't know the subject matter. You don't know what you're talking about. So we're going to rely on this. Number two, and I think potentially worse, they get the impression you don't really care. If you guys ever gone out to those professor evaluation sites online, look at yourself once, right? Right? But then go out and just sort of browse them casually. And one of the things you'll quickly find is that students have zero tolerance for professors who they think don't care about them or their class. Hell hath no fury as an undergrad who believes the professor doesn't care. By the flip side, if you want to boost your teacher evaluations, and I've preached this for years, be the professor that cares. That's the thing that they seem to resonate with most. This doesn't develop trust. This doesn't develop a relationship with your students. The substitute has no accountability, and the reality is this stuff isn't going to map directly to the curriculum that you want to teach. Okay? Now you think, wow, Jeff, that's pretty rough. There's a lot of good resources out there online. And there are. And I'm not saying just to discount them entirely, but the idea is instead of hiring a permanent substitute, what about having an occasional guest speaker? You guys okay with that? I like guest speakers for one of two reasons, okay? Number one, a guest speaker can either enhance what it is that I'm trying to teach, or a guest speaker can cover other material, what I'll call supplemental material, that maybe I don't have time to teach myself, because I'm focusing on the main curriculum. And I'll be honest with you, I was absolutely thrilled this morning. You guys all caught Jonathan's keynote. You see a lot of migration on the part of the educational publishers moving to what I call, for lack of a better term, electronic guest speakers. Material that's not a substitute, but that can enhance your class or bring in additional material maybe that you don't have time for. And so just to kind of mention this, because again, a lot of people think, oh, I have to do it all myself. You don't necessarily. What I would recommend is that you go out to the, what's the new word for it? It used to be the main room. They got a fancy digital asset room or something like that. And they've got all sort of machines set up. And you'll see things like MindTap and CourseMate and so forth. And now they're starting to create things that add to our class. They're media rich. They're available online. Their students like this format. And again, it helps with the flipped class because then it frees up things for us to do. And they're coming up with all sorts of different stuff as well. For example, someone was actually asking me this about 2 hours ago. This is some material that I developed for a particular series of book on soft skills that we've done. And I really like soft skills. By the way, it doesn't matter what topic I'm teaching. Let me tell you what we're covering in class. Guarantee you. That's that supplement that I think is so important. We created, essentially, a book on tape. That's weird. The author painstakingly recorded the entire book piece by piece. You say, why? Did you know that 23% of American college students are functionally illiterate? They can read, but they can't read. And so all of a sudden, we're coming up with material in different formats, in different modes, and for a lot of them, that's a game changer. So if you've got time, go look at the different things. You're starting to see a lot of creative solutions being developed. And ask yourself, could this enhance what I'm doing in class, or would this be a useful supplement to add to my class? And it becomes your digital guest speaker. Now, how do I create this out-of-class content? All right? First of all, don't get too focused on the out-of-class content. The most important part of flipped teaching, really, is what you're going to do in class. And we're going to talk about that. But this is a question that's on everyone's mind, so let's go ahead and answer it. You can create out-of-class content with nothing more than one of these. This is a computer headset. A lot of you probably own one. If you don't, you really need to. It's like a professor's best friend. I've got one at my office, one at home, and like 4 on the rack just waiting to be, rotated in. They're just wonderful. And we use them. First of all, it looks like you're working at your desk and you can listen to rock and roll music and your boss won't know. They'll think you're recording material. But it's also got the microphone and allows you to record audio information. I'm so encouraged by these. I've got a link that I'm going to give you where you can go out and buy these for less than $10 a piece. All right, they've become that much of a commodity, and they're just a good thing to have. But a lot of people do a flip class with nothing more than audio. You don't have to get into the video. In fact, in my classes, I'm doing more and more audio, and my students love it. If you're in one of my classes, at least once a week, I release something called Professor Jeff's Musings. And I just put on my headphone, and I have a conversation with my students about jobs, about the industry, news, whatever it is. It's one of the things that is the most cited as a positive in my student evaluations. I record it, it's a one-take recording, and I upload it. People ask me, what happens if you sneeze or burp while you're recording this? Up it goes, right? I'm human, and that's okay. They absolutely love it. What some people will do, okay, is they'll say, I'll take the book, and by the way, you don't need to create a lot of content. What you need to do is identify for a chapter 2 or 3 what we call VICs, V-I-C, very important concepts. These are the things that the students really need to know, or the things that are tricky and they might need a little extra coaching to help get them through it. You don't need to read the whole book to them, all right? Figure out 2 or 3 VICs, and even with just a microphone, say, go to page 75. Page 75 talks about this. let me explain the nuts and bolts of this. And talk for 5 minutes and upload the audio. And you speak right to their ears, into their brain. It's a very powerful technique, okay? So you don't need a lot to do it. If you want to bump it up a step, you can do it like this guy. Anyone recognize this gentleman here? This is Salman Khan. Sal Khan. He's the founder and principal of Khan Academy. And by the way, this is his studio. You were looking at it. And if you've never seen Khan Academy, he does these kind of mathematical tutorials where he writes and there's audio narration as he goes. He's very entertaining. And he's got that really cool look I like. It's got a black background and those nifty kind of fluorescent colors and stuff like that. I love the look of it. What he uses is something called a bamboo tablet. All right, and you can see he's got a little stylus in his hand. Bamboo's made by a company called Wacom, and they're about $65 from Amazon. And you write, and you talk, and off to the races you go. This is wonderful if in your class you like to solve problems. Math teachers in high school are all about this, right? In my class, I teach a project management course. So all of my Gantt charts and PERT charts, I do like this. It's wonderful for problem solving. And by the way, I can't give you all a bamboo tablet. I wish my budget would have accommodated it. But I tell you what I'd like to do. This is so cool that I'm going to give you a copy of the same software that Sal Khan uses to do the writing, as well as a screen recorder. And I want you to give it a try. And I'll give that to you all right, because you came today, and I want to encourage you doing this. All right, give it a try. Number 3. This is one of Sal's videos. This is what it would look like if you're looking on the screen. And you hear his voice, but what don't you see about Sal in most of it? You don't see his face. One of the things that's really important in online education, those of you that teach online, or in the online elements of a flipped class is something we call Instructor Presence. They need to see you, hear you, everything else, and this is missing. I used to teach in a lot of my seminars a technique for videoing stuff for online classes. And what I would say is, film yourself doing an intro, then film yourself doing a conclusion, and then film whatever you're going to do, stitch them together, render them as a video, and upload it to your Blackboard site. Not too hard, but that wasn't easy enough for most people. And I found a better way. Somebody else came up with it. The good folks at North Carolina State University. Yes, it's called Fizz Videos, and I'll give you a link to it. And they've got tutorials and stuff. This is a young lady named Katie Gimbar. She's a high school math teacher in North Carolina. I guarantee you, if you go out to YouTube and you search Flip Teaching, you will find her stuff on the first page. She's created a huge series of stuff on Flip Teaching, mostly for high school teachers. But on their site, and again, I'll give you the links to it. You don't have to write it all down. They show you how to do this. And what I'm going to do is show you a little video. We'll see if my little netbook can play it. All right, I've silenced the audio. But a few things that you'll notice. Number 1, how much instructor presence does she have? It's 100%. It's continuous. What they have is a $15 tripod. You can get a $15 tripod at Walmart in the photo section, and one of those little flip cameras. You guys all seen those? You can get them on Amazon real cheap. Some people say, well, I've got a smartphone. Well, the flip camera has a red button, and you can just reach out and push it, and it records, and then when you're done, you hit the little red button, and it stops. And so she, if you can imagine, she's in front of a whiteboard in her classroom, and right in front of her is a flip camera on a tripod. And she's talking. She's constantly in contact with the students that are watching it. Way better instructor presence. Now you say, what are those cool little boards she's got? Those are pretty slick, and there's tutorials on how to make them. You go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and they sell this white, shiny paneling. People must put that in their bathroom or something like that, right? And you get a piece of the paneling. They've all got panel saws at the wood stores. You cut it into 6 equal pieces, 24 by 32. But again, there's tutorials. They actually take a camera into Lowe's and show them pulling the wood and cutting and everything else. You get 6 boards for a $13 sheet of paneling. That's what I've got. Don't buy 2 pieces of paneling if you're long-winded. 6 little slide thingies is plenty. All you really need, again, is a 5-minute video. Remember, in a flipped class, you're still teaching class. Don't make it a class and a half. What do you think she's writing on that material? What's that ink that she's using? It's just whiteboard stuff, yeah. And then when you're done, you just wipe them with a rag and you reuse them. And so she just slides it over, slides it over, slides it over. But notice she's maintaining the instructor presence, establishing trust, cultivating a relationship with her students. And these, again, that flip camera has a little USB dongle. You just upload the video directly to your site and done. It couldn't be easier. So I've got links to all their tutorials and so forth, and this is the method I'm using now. Forget what I taught you in past years. This is a better approach. Our good friends in North Carolina have done us one better. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the last one. We'll be done here. This is the number one question that people ask when they're thinking about flipped teaching. They're like, oh my goodness. For as long as I've been in this business, all I do is get up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and for an hour I give the students my review and comment on the textbook, and it's worked oh so well. And now you're saying don't do that anymore. What am I going to do? And I think if we can't answer that question, a lot of people turn away and say, this isn't for me. It was interesting, coming down from my room this morning in the elevator, somebody recognized me, and they said, Jeff, I'm going to your flipped teaching thing, and what I want to hear, and I know you do this at all your presentations, I want you to tell me 1, 2, 3, how to solve this problem. I want an A, B, C, silver bullet kind of an approach. You know what a silver bullet is? It's the magic weapon that slays vampires and zombies and all that. Is there very many silver bullets in higher education, folks? No, I wish there were. But you know what? The fact that there isn't a 1, 2, 3 process, there's a lot of different things that you can do, and I think that variety is as much a blessing as it is a curse. Okay? Here's the main idea, though. Number one, you want to move from the passive to the active. Lecturing, folks, is passive. What are students doing? They're just listening to you and probably not doing a very good job of that, right? Move to the active. So I'm going to share with you a few tips, and I'm sharing tips just to get your creative juices flowing, okay? Tip number one, learn from other people who have figured it out. This is a picture of a gentleman named Eric Mazur. Eric's a physics teacher at Harvard. He's been teaching there for years. He teaches one of the intro sections for their pre-med student. He discovered some years ago that although he had really bright students, you would expect that at Harvard, and they could memorize the formulas and they could muddle through, they weren't learning. And so back in the day, this has been around for a while, he developed something that many consider to be kind of the precursor to today's modern flipped teaching. It's something called peer instruction. And he actually has his students answering questions. He doesn't lecture. He throws up questions and he has them answer it. And he has them using clickers. You know, clickers were really big a few years ago. I remember when clickers came out, I just shook my head and said, I can't see how those would work in my class. After watching him, I'm all about it. And I've got some links to some presentations he's given that are wonderful. One's called Confessions of a Converted Lecturer. Others are actual demonstrations of him doing this in his classes at Harvard. And by the way, as a tip, I'd love to do the clickers. My problem is I don't want the students to have to go out and buy a physical device. If anyone knows of a software program that simulates clickers on a local area network, like a piece of software, let me know, because I'm all about that. Come up. Is there one on the iPhone? They're on the phone. I'm really looking for one that I can install on the computer. But let me know afterward. I just had to ask because I know somebody in the audience has got the right answer. But what he does is he has them click, and the answers pop up, and half the class picks A and half the class picks D. And he says, okay, fine, take 2 minutes, and you convince your neighbor why you're right, and you convince your neighbor why you're right, and blah, the whole class erupts. And 2 minutes later, he has them vote again. And what he's found is that people who have the wrong answer can't really convince people of that very well, but people who have the right answer can. And he's done some fascinating studies to show this active kind of learning really promotes deep learning. So again, he's one that I would recommend. You will learn something from him. Number two, dust off those old textbooks. Right? They say there's two things that all professors have up on their wall, right? We have our diplomas and all the old books we've collected over all the years. And my PhD advisor said, Jeff, the reason we do that is so when students come and visit us, they think we're smart. Right? They're props. They're props. We don't look in those old books, do we? But let me tell you, some of those old textbooks used to include in the end of chapter materials and the instructor resources, lots of in-class activities. And I'll be honest with you, I remember them, and I said, I just lecture in class. I'm not going to pay any attention to them. Go back and dust them off, and you will find absolute nuggets of gold in those books. Now, if you were one of those people that sold your used books to the book gypsies, right, you're out of luck. Go to one of your colleagues. They kept their books, right? Somebody in the hall's got them. Or maybe your library, and shame on you for selling to the book gypsies in the first place. Right? But go back and look at those. Great resources. Number 3, a lot of talk in flip teaching about emphasizing something called student artifacts. Learning artifacts. That's where students actually create something as the result of their learning. That can be as simple as student presentations. If you teach a programming class, having the groups get up and do design reviews and having the students in the audience tear them up on the design reviews, get them used to that because they're going to experience it out in the real world. This is a poster session. A lot of people are having good luck with this, right? You can get those little 3-fold display boards for $5 at Walmart. And notice this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets of paper. And they can set those up in class and give them as presentations. There is one department in my college, by the way, that's doing this. They're having the students set these posters up in the foyer outside of the dean's office. Woo! That's really clever. Guess who's going to be doing that next year? Okay? And that's buying them a lot of currency. Hard to create? Not necessarily. Is that a good skill for students to learn how to develop? Absolutely. They have to work on their written, their communication, oral communication skills, their ability to present, ask questions, answer questions, things like that. Really very powerful. If you haven't tried it, give it a whirl. Last one, harness the power of games. Students love games. Doesn't matter how cheesy the game is, they love it. Why not? Cognitive scientists have told us that when the brain is engaged in a game, there is a direct pipeline coming right into the brain. Is there a similar direct pipeline during a college lecture? Not so much. When they're playing games, man, they're all in. And you guys have probably seen these kind of templates. People far creative, more creative than I am, have simulated TV game shows using PowerPoint. And there's a whole bunch of these, right? You guys all have these? If you don't, I'm going to give them to you. I got a whole collection of them. Again, I want you to give it a try. They're great for test reviews. They're great for group kind of competition on concept types of topics. It's a wonderful approach. By the way, you can populate these with test questions from the test banks that you can get from the publishers. It requires almost no effort. Wonderful class activity. Now, I could go on and on and on with tips, but we're out of time, and so I'm going to give you one last thing. I sat down and I went on the internet and I found all sorts of examples of different active learning things you can do in your class. And I put them all together. It turned out to be a 50-page book. I didn't write one of them. I'm simply the editor. But I've put that together and I would like to give that to you. It's a 50-page book for you. I would love it if you would download it, print it, stick it in a 3-ring binder, curl up in bed one night, read it and ask yourself, how can I make a difference in my class? How can I add value to my class in ways that people doing the MOOCs can't even fantasize about, will never be able to touch? All right? So hopefully that's a resource you can use. All right? By way of review, what have we talked about? Number 1, what is flip teaching? It's not just do homework in class, do class for homework. What it really is taking the best of both worlds. Figuring out what you can do online that's best done online, and figuring out ways we can do stuff in class that's going to be more active and engaging for our students. Question, should we use Khan Academy to teach our class? No. But can we use guest speakers and guest lectures? Look for technologies in particular that either enhance or supplement the classes that we teach. My goodness, what wonderful resources we have available. Can I easily create lecture material? Absolutely. What's the simplest way? Audio, just audio. Start with audio and work your way up. If you want to do video for problems, I recommend the Khan Academy approach. I'm giving you the software to do it. Okay? It's fun and it's easy to use. If you're going to create instructional videos, again, short, Fizz videos and links on how to do all that. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to go. And number 4, what do I do with all the in-class time? Move from the passive to the active. It is a game changer if you haven't tried it. I've been doing it for 2 years in my graduate classes. I can't imagine going back. It really makes that big of a difference. So by way of goodies, here's what I've got. You're all familiar with bit.ly, right? Because my URL is a big long one. All you need to remember are those last 6 characters. They are case sensitive. Capital W, capital D, 3, Q, D, alpha. If you didn't learn how to write, by the way, college students can't take notes in your class because they no longer teach handwriting in public schools. They expect your lecture notes to be available as a QR code. So I've got a QR code you can take a picture of. Folks, did anyone learn anything maybe today that you might want to try putting into practice in your class? I've always believed if you have one idea that you've learned during a session at one of these conferences, then the time we've spent has been time well spent indeed. I've absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you all so very, very much for coming today, and I hope you all have a fantastic Course Technology 2013. And I'd be happy to stay around and answer any questions that you guys have got. Thank you all. Oh, they're grabbing the QR code. Good. That's a whole lot easier than writing it down. Okay, good question. Question was asked, what do you do if they come to class and they didn't do what you asked them to do? That's a great question. Students won't do anything unless they get a grade for it or a reward. So what I like to do are what I call point of contact little Quizlets. 5-question quizzes in my Blackboard that test them on the material outside of class. And I'm using the online to do that. And it works really well. For 5 points out of 1,000, they'll kill themselves trying to earn those 5 points. It's crazy.